to the channel, everyone. Today I'm taking my brand new Losi 5IVE-T 3.0 to the RC 045 Bashtrack here in the Netherlands. But first, just look at the size of this absolute monster. Next to a mini Creighton and even a 1/7 Italian, this thing makes them look like they're on a diet. I'm going to take it easy at first. You know how it is. Brand new RC car and every tiny scratch feels like emotional damage. Every single time I buy a new RC, I tell myself exactly the same thing. Roger, just drive it nicely. No full throttle, no huge jumps, no crazy stunts. Just enjoy the first battery pack. It sounds like a great plan until I actually pull the trigger. But today I'm really going to try. This Losi wasn't exactly cheap, and just look at it. The body looks amazing, the suspension is huge, the tires are massive, and everything about this truck just screams quality. It almost feels wrong to get it dirty. For the first few minutes, I just want to get to know the truck. Every RC has its own personality. Some cars feel incredibly aggressive, others are very predictable, and some surprise you the moment you hit the throttle. This is my very first drive with the Losi 5IVE-T 3.0, so I have no idea what to expect. The first thing I always pay attention to is the steering. Does it turn sharply? Does it feel stable at speed? Does it stay planted over rough terrain? Those first impressions usually tell you a lot about how the rest of the day is going to go. Then there's the suspension. Looking at these shocks, you'd expect them to absorb almost anything. They're huge, and with a truck this size, they need to be. The bigger and heavier the vehicle, the more important a good suspension setup becomes. Another thing I'm curious about is how balanced the truck feels. Some RCs love to wheelie every time you touch the throttle. Others just launch forward without lifting the front wheels at all. This Losi feels different already. Even driving slowly, you can tell there's a lot of weight behind it. It has that realistic, big-scale feeling that smaller RCs simply can't match. That's one of the reasons I wanted this truck so badly. I've owned a lot of RC cars over the years, but there's just something special about driving a giant machine like this. Everything happens a little differently. It doesn't dart around like a lightweight buggy. It has presence. It looks realistic. And every bump, every corner, and every acceleration feels more like driving a real off-road truck. Now, even though I'm only running 8S today to begin with, don't let that fool you. 8 cells and a truck like this are still incredibly powerful. There's more than enough speed to have fun, and definitely enough power to get yourself into trouble if you're not paying attention. That's exactly why I'm taking things slowly. I'd rather spend the first battery pack learning the truck than spend the rest of the afternoon collecting broken parts from around the track. Besides, every new RC deserves a proper break-in session. Not because the electronics need it, but because the driver certainly does. I need to learn how early I should brake for a corner, how quickly the truck changes direction, how much throttle it needs coming out of a turn, and most importantly, how much confidence I can have before I start pushing it harder. The funny thing is every little sound makes you nervous during the first run. You hear a tiny stone hit the body. Was that a scratch? You hear a branch rubbing against the side. There goes the paint. Another RC drives a little too close. Please don't hit me. It's amazing how protective you become during those first few minutes. Ask me again after a few weeks, and I'll probably be launching this thing 20 feet into the air without thinking twice. That's just how this hobby works. Eventually, every RC changes from my beautiful new truck into let's see if it survives this jump. But today we're still in the honeymoon phase. I'm simply enjoying every second behind the wheel. And I have to say, the first impressions are fantastic. The truck feels incredibly stable. It soaks up the bumps with ease. The steering feels smooth and predictable, and despite its size, it doesn't feel difficult to drive at all. In fact, it's surprisingly confidence-inspiring. You almost forget just how much this thing weighs until you need to slow it down. And that's another thing I'm paying attention to today, the brakes. With this much mass moving around, good braking performance is just as important as raw power. So far, everything feels exactly as I hoped it would, maybe even better. But let's be honest, we all know why you're really watching this video. You're not here to see me driving carefully around the track forever. You're waiting for the moment when the sensible decisions stop and the bad ideas begin. Because this truck wasn't built just for 8S. This monster was born to run on 12S. That's when the real fun starts. That's when the acceleration becomes ridiculous. That's when this giant truck really shows what it's capable of. And trust me, I'm just as excited as you are. So enjoy these first laps with me while I get comfortable with the truck, because once the 12S batteries go in, all bets are off. Let's see what this beast can really do. And on 8S, it still managed a very respectable 42 kilometers per hour. Now, that might not sound insanely fast if you're used to smaller RC cars, but remember, this is a huge 1/5 scale truck weighing well over 25 kilograms. Seeing something this big moving at that speed is seriously impressive. And now, it's finally time for the moment I've been looking forward to the most. I've installed two 6S batteries, giving this monster the full 12S setup. As I'm walking back to the track, I have to admit, I get that little nervous feeling. You start wondering, will it still drive as nicely as it did on 8S? Will it still feel planted and easy to control? Or is this going to be one of those moments where I squeeze the throttle once, make it halfway around the track, and the truck ends up somewhere in the bushes? Thankfully, those doubts disappear almost immediately. Within the first few seconds, my confidence is back. The truck still feels incredibly stable, predictable, and surprisingly easy to control. Yes, it's much faster, but it never feels wild or out of control. Losi really nailed the setup on this truck. And then, the acceleration. Wow, for the stock gearing, the speed is absolutely insane. Every time I pull the trigger, this giant just keeps building speed. It almost feels effortless, like the truck is barely working. It's one of those RCs that just keeps surprising you. Every straight feels shorter than the last because you're reaching the end before you even realize how fast you're going. Which immediately gets me thinking, what happens when I install the optional 62-tooth spur gear together with the 25-tooth pinion? If it's already this quick with the standard setup, I can only imagine what that gearing combination is going to be like. To be honest, I think this track might simply be too short. I'd probably spend more time looking for somewhere to brake than actually accelerating. But that's a problem for another day. Right now, I'm just enjoying every second behind the wheel, and I honestly couldn't have asked for a better first day with the Losi 5IVE-T 3.0. Standing here watching this giant beast tear around the track, I can't help but think back to how I actually managed to get my hands on this truck. Believe me, it wasn't easy. When Losi announced the 5IVE-T 3.0, I immediately knew I wanted one. Unfortunately, I was just a little too late placing my order. Apparently, only around 100 of these trucks were shipped to Europe in the very first batch, and they had to be divided between all the dealers. Not long after placing my order, I received a message from my favorite RC shop, Shamrock. They told me the bad news. I wasn't one of the lucky people who would receive a truck from the first shipment. Instead, I'd have to wait for the next delivery. At first, they expected that shipment somewhere around the end of July or the beginning of August. Not exactly what I wanted to hear, but okay, I figured I could wait a little longer. Meanwhile, two of my mates from RC045 had already received theirs. Every weekend I watched them driving these incredible trucks while I could only stand there, looking at them with a mixture of excitement and jealousy. Then things got even worse. Rumors started spreading that the second shipment might not arrive until October. October? Seriously? By then the summer would practically be over. Buying a brand new truck like this and immediately having to drive it through rain, mud and wet conditions just didn't feel right. I was honestly pretty disappointed. Then something completely unexpected happened. My clubmate, Martin, shared a marketplace advertisement in our group. Someone was selling a brand new Losi 5IVE-T 3.0, still sealed in the box. I contacted the seller straight away. After exchanging a few emails and messages, we quickly came to an agreement, and before I knew it, I was driving about an hour and a half to Helmond. And honestly, that trip was worth every single kilometer. The seller, Thijs, welcomed me with a big smile and explained that he simply didn't have enough time to enjoy the truck. He wasn't trying to make a profit either. He sold it to me for exactly the retail price because he wanted someone to enjoy it this summer instead of having to wait until October. Luckily, that someone turned out to be me. So once again, thank you so much, Thijs. But there's another reason why meeting Thijs was such a great experience.
he isn't just a really friendly guy, he also has an unbelievable amount of knowledge about RC cars, the kind of knowledge you rarely come across. We spent quite a while talking about the hobby, different builds and future projects, and I could have listened to him for hours. Many RC enthusiasts in the Netherlands know Model Sport Toemen, one of the biggest RC shops in the country. They're also the only Dutch dealer offering primal RC trucks converted to electric power with some absolutely stunning custom bodies. Well, the person building those incredible conversions is none other than Thijs. And while I was there, he was already working on his next masterpiece. A huge primal RC conversion with four-wheel steering, powered by a Hobbywing Max 4 system and a massive 560 kV motor running on 12S. All I could do was stand there and admire it. It was one of those RC projects that immediately makes you think, I need one of these someday. But for now, I was more than happy to drive home with my own dream truck sitting safely in the back of the car. So once again, a huge thank you to Thijs for making this possible.
Thanks to you, I don't have to wait until October. Instead, I get to enjoy this incredible Losi all summer long, exactly the way it was meant to be driven. As the day went on, more and more people arrived at the track with their own RC cars. And that's when you really start to appreciate just how enormous the Losi 5IVE-T E3.0 actually is. Normally, a 1/8 scale truck looks pretty big. Even a 1/7 scale car usually has plenty of presence on the track. But park them next to the Losi, and suddenly they look like little toys. The size difference is honestly hilarious. It almost looks like a dad driving around with a group of kids following behind. In fact, you have to pay extra attention when you're driving this thing. You definitely don't want to accidentally drive over one of the smaller RC cars. With a truck this heavy, that probably wouldn't end well for the little guy. It's funny how quickly you have to change your driving style. Instead of worrying about another RC hitting you, you're constantly checking where everyone else is so you don't accidentally flatten someone's pride and joy. Luckily, everyone on the track gave each other plenty of room most of the time, and it made for some really cool moments seeing this giant Losi sharing the track with much smaller RCs. Those comparison shots really put the size into perspective. No matter how many photos or videos you've seen online, you don't truly realize how massive this truck is until it's parked next to a regular 1/8 scale basher. That's when it finally hits you. This thing isn't just big, it's absolutely enormous. And then came my favorite moment of the entire day. Seeing one Losi 5IVE-T E3.0 on the track is already an impressive sight, but seeing two of these giants running together, now that's something else entirely. A little later, Martin arrived with his own Losi 5IVE-T E3.0, and it was finally time to let these two monsters loose on the track together. The sight of both trucks charging around at full speed was absolutely incredible. Everywhere they went, they kicked up huge clouds of dust, and the ground almost seemed to shake as they blasted past. Of course, it didn't take long before we started having a few friendly races. Nothing too serious, just two RC enthusiasts enjoying their dream trucks and seeing what these giant machines could do. Before we started, we both agreed on one thing. Let's try not to hit each other. With trucks this big, heavy, and expensive, even a small collision could easily end the day with broken parts and a very expensive repair bill. So we tried to leave each other plenty of room. Close enough to make the racing exciting, but far enough apart to avoid turning two beautiful Losis into two expensive repair projects. Well, that was the plan anyway. As careful as we tried to be, we still managed to bump into each other a couple of times. Nothing major, thankfully. Just a few little taps that made both of us instantly lift off the throttle and check whether everything was still in one piece. Luckily, both trucks simply shrugged it off and kept going. After that, we just laughed about it and carried on racing. That's the fun of driving with friends. You want to beat each other, but you definitely don't want to break each other's pride and joy.
The races were close, the trucks looked absolutely spectacular together, and I honestly couldn't stop smiling. Watching two Losi 5IVE-T 3.0 trucks chasing each other around the track is something you don't see every day. And if you ask me, it doesn't get much better than that. Just look at these two incredible machines charging around the Bashtrack. Honestly, sometimes I have to stop for a moment and remind myself that these are actually RC cars. The size, the power, the realism. It's almost unbelievable that something like this even exists. Watching two giant Losi 5IVE-T 3.0 trucks driving together is one of those moments that really makes you appreciate just how far this hobby has come. And it also makes me think about my own journey in RC. Like many people, I started with something much smaller. As a little kid, I was absolutely thrilled with my Nico Turbo Panther. Back then, that was the coolest thing I could possibly imagine. I must have driven that car until the batteries were completely empty, and then I'd be counting the minutes until I could charge them again. Not long after that came the Tamiya years. Building the car yourself was half the fun. Opening all those little bags of parts, following the manual step by step, and finally putting the body on for the very first time. That feeling never gets old. Then, as the years went by, the hobby kept evolving. Brushless motors, LiPo batteries, ready-to-run models, better electronics, more power, more speed. And every few years, RC cars seem to take another huge step forward. I never imagined that one day I'd be standing here holding the transmitter of a giant 1/5 scale truck with enough power to make almost anything else on the track look tiny. If someone had shown this to my younger self, I probably wouldn't have believed it. And that's actually a pretty amazing thought. I've been able to watch this hobby grow from simple toy-grade RC cars into these incredible high-performance machines. I honestly feel very lucky to have experienced that journey. Not everyone gets to watch their favorite hobby evolve like this over the years. Who knows what the future will bring? Maybe even bigger RC cars, maybe even more realistic technology, or things we can't even imagine yet. One thing is certain, I hope I'm still around to see it all, because if the last few decades have taught me anything, it's that this hobby never stops surprising me. And I can't wait to see what comes next.
Well, the batteries are empty, and it's time to head home. After today's first run, I can honestly say I'm incredibly impressed with the Losi 5IVE-T 3.0. It drives exactly the way I hoped it would. There is just one small downside: the body. It looks fantastic, but because it's made from several hard plastic panels, it doesn't like rolling over very much. One tumble is enough to leave some pretty noticeable scratches. Luckily, I already have a solution. I've ordered a custom body wrap from Bashtrack. Not only will it give the truck its own unique look, but it should also help hide those scratches. After that, I'll just have to stop rolling it over. Easy, right? Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next RC adventure.